Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Shanna show. As you can tell from the title and the thumbnail for this video, this is de-influencing you from 7 topics within the anime and manga community. Now, I did use community in the singular because there is honestly too much overlap between the two. You can have 2 separate sub-communities within this, being just the anime community and just the manga community, but at the end of the day, there's just so much overlap that they're almost indistinguishable from each other. They're not fully indistinguishable. You can distinguish between the two, but they're almost indistinguishable from each other. Also, in some of these points, I will be touching on the topic of elitism in a sense within the community, and that is a can of worms. The topic as a whole of elitism within the anime and manga community, that topic as a whole is for another video and another time. I will, like I said, I will be touching on it within certain topics, but I'm not really going to be doing a deep dive into the elitism aspect of these topics, but I will bring it up when necessary, and I will talk about how some of these topics can be slightly more elitist, especially from some more of the snobbish people within the community. And one more thing before I get into this as well is that a lot of these things tend to be on display. The worst of the worst tends to be on display for a lot of communities, including the anime and manga communities. So it's you often see the really negative parts of some of these topics on display, and it's not to say that these things, you shouldn't enjoy these things or you shouldn't be doing them, but it's just, on the whole, this video is more so to say that we need to be conscious and active in the way we approach some of these topics, because with some of them it's not really a choice. Well, it is for all of them, it's a choice, but it's not really it's not always an obvious choice for everyone. It's not obvious what's the obvious. It's not always going to be the same obvious choice for every single person, which I think a lot of people forget. And also too, because there have been so many things that happen at conventions, at events that center around anime and manga, that there are things that sometimes will happen that are more negative, and that's what's highlighted. And this isn't to add to that, but I just think we need to come together as a community and not participate in that and actively work against that. And like I said, this is more so to encourage more critical thinking and conscious thinking when we're doing or saying certain things within this community. So with all of that said, I'm going to go into the 7 topics that I'll be de-influencing you from within the anime and manga community. None of these are super serious, because a lot of the more serious topics are topics that could be addressed in a whole video, and I don't want to, at least right now, I kind of don't want to get into those, and also kind of don't have the time to get into those and to dedicate a whole video to those topics. So I'm not really getting into those ones, and these ones aren't super serious, but I just wanted to get that little disclaimer out of the way. But actually getting into these 7 topics that I'll be de-influencing you from. So first and foremost is the sub versus dub debates. This is one of the more elitist topics, or topics that tend to be under that elitism umbrella within the community. For the anime watching portion of the community, there is that debate of sub versus dub. I grew up watching dub. I've never had a problem with that. I have And honestly, 99% of the people that I know within this community that I've met through because of this community, 99% of the time they don't care. And again, it's like oftentimes those like really bad apples, like I mentioned, that are focused on. And more often than not, people will argue for the English subtitles and watching it in the original Japanese, which I am all for. My thinking has always been, I have gone back and watched quite a few of the anime in the original Japanese, but my original thinking, or not my original thinking, but my thinking 9 times out of 10 when I'm going into an anime, especially for the first time, is I want to go into a story and not have, like, I'm used to reading subtitles. I put on subtitles even with English stuff. But when I'm going into a new story, I want to be focusing on the story rather than trying to understand what they're saying. And that is a very privileged way of going about that. And that's also why once I am familiar with the story, like if I haven't watched the manga, or if I haven't read the manga first and I'm watching the anime for the first time, then I do want to understand the story a little bit better, so that once I do rewatch it, if it's one that I want to rewatch, once I do rewatch it, I don't have to pay as much attention because I kind of know what's going, or I pretty much know what's going on. And then that's also when I can switch over to dub. Or not dub, it's when I can switch it over to sub. So I tend to watch it in the English dub so that I can get that understanding. And also, even if I have read the manga originally, I do tend to watch dub first so I can get an understanding of where the anime may have differed from the manga, and again have a good understanding of the story of the anime specifically, even though 9 times out of 10 it does align with the manga. Like, I want to be able to understand the anime specifically, and then that way I have the understanding of the story, at least anime wise. And then the second, third time I still might watch it in the dub, and then by the 4th or 5th time I can like switch over to the Japanese. And like I'll still watch I'll still watch a lot in the English dub, but like after like I said, like maybe 4 or 5 times I can watch in the original language without worrying too much about like, okay, what was going on in this scene. Okay, I also have to read subtitles. Again, that is a very privileged perspective and point of view, which I acknowledge, but at the same time it's like I'm not the only one who kind of thinks that way or what prefers the dub. And like with dub, like if it's not your original language and you're not used, like aside from the fact that I've grown up watching anime and being in this community, like if you're trying to get into anime for the first time, if you're trying to get into that genre, or even like anything that's not part of your native tongue, it's going to be easier to watch that thing dubbed in your native tongue than it is going to be watching it in the original thing. It doesn't matter if it's anime or not. Like I've been watching Shogun. I've been like putting off finishing it for a little while. I've gotten through a majority of it though, but I like in that sense, like with Shogun, you're kind of forced to watch it in the Japanese as an English speaker. You do have the main character John Blackthorn, and then Mariko-sama, and then the Portuguese, and you have like the English. You're watching it as like an English speaker, hearing it in English, but with the Japanese, you're kind of forced to watch it in the Japanese because that was the role of the one monk and Mariko-sama. Like their roles were to act as translators, or like 75% of their roles was the active part of their roles was acting as translator. So you're like, in that sense, it's like you're forced to watch the Japanese, which again, I'm totally fine with that. But it's getting back on topic. It's a situation where it's like, if you're not used to watching something in your native language, or if you're not used to watching something not in your native language and you have the option to dub it over in your native language, 9 times out of 10, most people would choose to dub it over. Like, whether it's in Japanese or French or Italian, if you have the option to dub it over, most people will. It doesn't matter the language. And that's where I kind of think the sub versus dub debate is kind of, one, elitist in the sense of like, okay, not everyone is super comfortable watching it in the original Japanese, which at the end of the day is none of our business as to why they chose to watch dub or sub. And it's also, like I mentioned earlier, a little bit elitist, because it's like, okay, good for you for choosing to watch the sub. Like, good for you. That's not a big deal. Like I said, there are situations where you can't watch a dubbed version, so it's like, it's not a big deal at the end of the day. But moving on to the next one is, this is another topic that kind of delves into the elitist umbrella. Manga only versus anime only debate. And with this one, I like, kind of like with the sub versus dub, I have heard this argument more from like the manga only people rather than anime only. But it's like, it's kind of that situation, or like, it's just kind of that situation where it's like, okay, good for you. You read manga. Great. We should all try to read more manga. But kind of like forcing that down people who only watch anime. Like forcing that down their throats as like a good thing or a better thing than just watching anime. It's like, again, like I've only heard more so the manga only side of this. Although I have seen some moments where it's like anime only. But I feel like the anime only one is more so as a pushback to manga only, rather than people like genuinely thinking, oh, you should only watch anime. I feel like it's more of a pushback argument rather than people genuinely thinking that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just the way I think, but it is what it is. But like with the people who only read manga only, and it's like, kudos to you. And like I said, people should be reading more manga, and I have been trying to build up my manga and manhwa collection, but it's like, that doesn't, it's kind of like the thing where it's like, okay, yes, you chose to watch the anime sub. Okay, yes, great, you're choosing to read manga. That's great. We should do more of that. We should do more of both of those, but that doesn't make you better than the other side just because you chose that one thing. But at this point, I'm kind of beating a dead horse here. The next topic is, again, kind of under that same umbrella, which is why it's all together, but slightly diverting now a little bit more, is always reading the manga / OG work first. And I put an OG work there just because sometimes it's a manhwa or a comic or manga adaptation of the manhwa or of the text. And there are a lot of people who say that, oh, you should only read the manga first. And it's like, okay, first off, not everyone has access to manga, especially if you're looking at smaller bookstores or smaller cities, smaller towns that maybe don't have a large chain bookstore like Barnes & Noble, and maybe their bookstore, or this would be an indoor situation where it's like, and or their local bookstore, chain or not, doesn't have the best manga selection, if any manga selection. Like my sister and I and my sister's friends who are also manga and anime watchers, like we all remember a time when, especially like Borders was a little bit better about this, but even then Borders went out of business. When Barnes & Noble had very little manga choices, had a very small manga selection area, very small manga section, and even then it wasn't the best options, and I shouldn't say that, it wasn't a variety of options, and it wasn't a wide variety of options, and it was kind of in the back, usually in the back corner of the store. And now, like, going into your local bookstore, there's at least one good chunk of like a wall, or like you have like those sections where they have that, and then they have like the little, anyway, so sometimes you'll get like a full 3 walls or 3 sections of bookshelves that are manga and dedicated to manga. And it's like, well, yeah, that's 10-ish years later, a decade later. And again, so kind of on that point where it's like manga is not always easily accessible. And I would say that if that's the case for you, then take a look at like Libby or Hoopla or your local library. But even then, Libby can be a little bit better depending on the manga you're looking for. It might not always have it accessible, but anyway, having the local library, again, it might not be the best selection, especially depending on the size of the area you're in. Might not be the best selection, and with Libby, you usually have to wait a little bit longer or not wait at all, but they might not have the next volume if it's something you're enjoying. And we're really trying not to buy too much from Amazon, but that's a different point. So it's not always possible to consistently read the manga or the original work first. Like, and besides that, besides accessibility reasoning and potential issues, sometimes it's the anime that gets people into the manga. Like, I know with a lot of the stuff that I watched, like, that was what got me into the manga. Like, 90% of the manga, 90% of the anime that I've watched, I watched it before reading the manga, and then I read the manga. I think there were a couple of exceptions. Delicious in Dungeon is more recent, and I have been reading the manga around this. I watched season 1 first, and then I started reading the manga. And then we're waiting on season 2. Sorry to step away for a minute, but The Apothecary Diaries, I've read the first 4 volumes, and I haven't watched the anime yet. Fruits Basket, I can't quite remember if I read the manga before or if I read it around the same time that I watched the anime. But it's like one of those things where probably for most people it's the anime that gets them into the manga. And there are some cases where the anime wraps up and is done, but the manga is still continuing. And sometimes some people just want to see if they'll like the whole story before dedicating their time to a manga that is not complete. Black Butler in question. Black Butler, the anime is not complete though, from what I understand. Or I don't even know. Let's see. Is Black Butler manga? Is the manga finished? Yeah, of course it's not. Oh. So, the mangaka, Yana Toboso, is apparently preparing for the final arc while she's on hiatus. Maybe I'll go back into Black Butler. Anyway. Okay, let's see. Anime finished. Okay, yeah. So the anime is also not finished, but it's kind of one of those situations where sometimes you want to test the waters with the anime before dedicating time to an unfinished work, which we should always try to support authors who are, and mangaka in this case, who are still writing, because a lot of the times that is what helps them continue to write. But at the same time, it's like the anime does also help to support the mangaka in some cases, in a lot of cases. So it's very much a situation where it's like sometimes they just need to test the waters with the anime before dedicating time and in a lot of cases money to the manga. And there are so many instances where the anime is a bit more accessible than the manga, because most of us have access to Netflix, or quite a few people have access to Netflix, either their own subscription or a family members or friends. And Netflix has quite a few anime on it. I know Hulu has a few anime, and then Crunchyroll has like a wide variety of anime, and then Amazon Prime has quite a few anime. So depending on the subscription services that someone has access to, they might have easier access to getting the anime, whereas the manga might take a little bit more finding and trying to get access to it, where, you know, anime can be watched from a computer or an iPad or a phone even. And this is a personal thing, but I tend to prefer physical manga, where like I'm perfectly fine with ebooks and audiobooks. I will tout those day and night, but for manga specifically and like graphic novels and stuff, I tend to prefer the physical ones. That's just a me thing. I'm not entirely sure why, but sometimes, like I said, sometimes the anime is more accessible, and like I also said, sometimes that's what gets people into the manga. So you can't just say like you should always read it first. But moving on to the next one, I'm only on like 4 here, but the next one is owning all of the manga you read or will read or have read. And this is one where like I've shown my manga shelf before. See my little octopus friend. But like I am slowly trying to build out my manga collection, and the reasoning the method to the madness, for me at least, with this is kind of like with, or basically like all of my books, where I am trying to have on my shelves the books that I enjoy. So applying it to manga and manhwa, I'm trying to have the manga and manhwa that I have enjoyed and that I will finish, or that I am at least 8% likely to finish, on my shelves. Because if I'm going to read a manga and I drop it at like 10 when there's like 20 plus novels, then like if I liked those first 10 enough, then maybe I would hold on to it. But if I didn't like it, or if I didn't like it enough to continue, then for me it's like that's not a good enough reason to hold on to it if I didn't like it enough to continue. Or if it was one that I finished and just didn't enjoy as much, again, we don't need to hold on to the things that we don't enjoy or didn't enjoy as much. And we don't have to dislike something to get rid of it. It is okay to get rid of things you like, but we don't have to hold on to everything just because we have read it or are going to read it. We don't have to own everything that we read or will read. So that's just the point of that. And also too, it's like manga aren't that expensive. Like I have one kind of accessible, but not really. I'm gonna pull out 2 of my manga real quick, just randomly. So Apothecary Diaries Volume 4. This is $12.99, so $13. And then Yashahime Volume 1. This is $9.99. And it's funny because like you would expect the smaller one to be cheaper height-wise. But manga is pretty cheap. Usually most manga is no more than like $12-ish, $12, $13. Sometimes it does get up to $15, but like usually it's not more than $15. This is in US dollars. And so they are on the cheaper side for books, but monetarily speaking, like even though it's usually in the 8 to 9 to 15 range, it's not always feasible to buy every single manga you want to read or have read. That's not always financially feasible. So there's that to think about. The next thing is completing a full anime series or even a full manga series. So completing the full series, you have to read the full manga series, you have to read you have to watch the full anime series to really have an opinion about it, or either to have an opinion about it or to say that you'd watched it and to have like any semblance of a discussion about it. I like half agree with this kind of a commentary with this topic, because I do think, for me at least, my standards is that it's easier to get through manga because it's like they're on the shorter side. But with books, like with regular novels, well, I shouldn't say regular novels, with novels, I try to give myself within the 25 to 50% range before DNFing a book, because it's the situation where if I'm not enjoying it, then I'm not enjoying it. And kind of the same thing with series. Like with movies, it's a little bit easier because you can just spend like an hour and a half plus watching the movie and then just never watch it again. And sometimes you can just stop it halfway through or a quarter of the way through the movie, and that's pretty easy as well. And with TV series, again, like with movies and TV shows, TV series, I don't really give myself that same thing, because it's like, in my mind, if I'm not captured within TV series, if I'm not captured within the first 1 to 3 episodes, if I'm not invested, then I'm not going to continue it unless someone else I know wanted me to continue it. With movies, usually I try to watch the full thing. But on the topic of reading the full manga series or watching the full anime series to say that you watched it, it's like, if you watched the first episode, then you watch the first episode. And if you didn't like it, sometimes you just know within the first episode that you didn't like it. And you can still say, like, I didn't like it because in the first episode, A, B, and C happened. I didn't like it, so I decided not to continue it. And the same thing with the mangas. With the manga series, you can say, I read volume 1. I did not like it because of D, E, and F, and I just decided not to continue because of that. And that is perfectly okay to stop with the first episode, with the first manga volume, to stop there and just not continue. And then there's the other half of it where it's like trying to complete it or getting through a majority of it to say that you had watched it, to say that you had read it. And that's kind of bogus to me. It's BS to me personally, because it's like, if you watch the first episode, you still watch the first episode. You shouldn't be going around saying, I watched the entire show, and kind of make it, or you shouldn't go around saying, I read the entire manga series. And it does get a little bit iffy when you say, like, oh, I watched this anime, like I watched Inuyasha, or I read the Apothecary Diaries. Because that is a bit misleading, so I can understand why some people would get annoyed and why you might feel like you have to watch it. Because if you say, oh, I watched this, or I read this, but you only read the first volume or watched the first episode, then that is a little bit misleading. But at the end of the day, if you didn't watch it, it's like, oh, I stopped at, like, I think a better way to phrase it would be, I stopped at episode such and such. I stopped reading at volume such and such. And I, like, that's the thing here, where it's like, we shouldn't need to have that caveat of, I didn't finish it, I stopped it here. But to have an opinion about something, because we're all going to have opinions about things. And I think we all need to be okay with having civil discussions with people who didn't finish a book, or who didn't finish a manga, or who didn't finish an anime. Like, it's okay to have civil discussions like that, because the reason why they stopped could be very valid. And maybe if it's a manga series or an anime that you really liked, maybe this could be the conversation that encourages them to continue. Maybe not, but there is that possibility, you know? So it's like, you shouldn't discount someone's opinion just because they didn't finish the manga or didn't finish the anime. And you don't have to complete it to have an opinion on what you've already watched or read. So that's where I'm going to stop for here, for that point. The next one, topic 6, is buying multiple volumes of a manga. And I did talk about a similar topic within my other bookish de-influencing video, where it's like buying the full series. With manga, it's a little bit harder to buy the full series, because even though they're only in that $8 to $15 range, like that can still add up, especially if there are 10 plus volumes within the series. Like if it's like $8, let's say it's $9, because that tends to be the average, and you're buying 10, that's already $90 you're dropping on the series, which may not seem like a lot, but at the same time it kind of is. So you don't need to buy multiple volumes of the manga. And yeah, it does make it easier because then you can just whiz through it. Sorry, I thought I needed to pause. It does make it easier buying multiple volumes of the manga series because, like I said, you can end up whizzing through them if you're enjoying it, and you don't have to wait for the next one. But it's kind of like what I was talking about earlier, where it's always reading the manga first. Kind of like what I was talking with that topic. It's not always financially feasible to buy the full manga series or even multiple volumes of the manga. It's not always feasible space-wise, because like the bookshelf that I've shown, like that's my only bookshelf. I do have a 361. I might not use it anymore because it wasn't, it's good for what it is, but it wasn't the best. So it's like space isn't always an option. Like my room is small, so I don't have a lot of room for multiple bookshelves. Even that 360 bookshelf was pushing it a little bit. But like space and finances might not always make it feasible to buy multiple volumes of manga. And then let's say you buy 10 volumes of manga and you don't like the first 2, then you still have 8 more volumes of the manga that you're not going to read, and then you have to probably get rid of them so that they're not sitting on your shelves collecting dust. So there's that. Again, that kind of ties into the feasible space thing, where it's like those 10 volumes that you only read 2 of and didn't like and aren't going to read the next 8, those could be used for 10 volumes of another manga that you liked, or 10 other books, you know, like, well, maybe 5 other books, 5 other novels at least, where it's like that could be used for other manga or other books and to kind of enhance the space a little bit more. So it just, there's that to consider. And then the last topic is that you have to keep up with the new current anime and manga series. And for this, it's like, it is nice keeping up with that because you can kind of see what, like, you can be a little bit more in the know, you can feel a little bit more in the know, and kind of be on the same wavelength as a lot of other people. But it's not like a requirement that you always have to watch the new and current anime or read the new and current manga to be considered in the know, to be kind of on par with the anime and manga community. It's like, it's not necessary. Like, some of my favorite anime and manga are the older ones, and part of that is just my personal taste and like what I grew up with, and the fact that a lot of more recent series, anime and manga, haven't really been meeting what I expect from that. And it's not to say that the more recent stuff is bad. A lot of them are very good, but for me it just doesn't meet my personal expectations. And the Apothecary Diaries is a new one that I've really been liking. The Delicious in Dungeon, really fun. Remarried Empress, Perks of Being an S-Class Heroine. Like, I've read a lot of really good ones recently that are more current. But a lot of my favorites were from the old ones, like Inuyasha, Fruits Basket, Black Butler, before, in my opinion, it did start going downhill. Trinity Blood, I still need to read the manga for Trinity Blood. I've read volume 1 and 2, I think. What else? Magic Knight Rayearth. There's some others. But a lot of my favorites are old because are the older ones, like 1990s, you know, because that's the kind of stuff that I like, and I'm not always wanting to go into something super gory. Trinity Blood is pretty gory. I'm not always wanting something like that though. which is why it's like, you don't have to. If you want to watch an older anime, watch an older anime. If you want to watch an older manga, if you want to read an older manga series, read an older manga series. And oftentimes with like the older stuff, there's a better guarantee of that being complete. And well, it's debatable because Black Butler has been going on for 18 years. So that's like 2025, 18. So it started in 2007. So like, well, 1990 stuff, at least there's a bit of a better guarantee that it'll be completed. I would say like 1990s to 2010, there's a little bit of a stronger chance of it being complete. Black Butler is the big exception that I can think of. But yeah, so it's like, sometimes if you need something complete, which I totally understand and sympathize with, sometimes older stuff is the way to go. Like, as long as you know that it's going to be typical of that 1990s to 2010s time period, of those specific time periods, and like what those references would be and what those genres would be and tropes would be, especially tropes within the manga culture and anime cultures. As long as you're aware of that, go for it. Because I'm not one to diss against the older animes and mangas, because again, those are a lot of my favorites. So yeah, with all that said, that is the end of this video. I've talked for quite some time now and had a lot of enjoyment talking about it. If you have anything else that you would want to de-influence others from within the anime and manga community, please comment down below in the comments, letting me know, and kind of maybe even you don't have to give a reasoning, but reasoning would be interesting to see. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.